the big issue was what to do with the supposed L shape, which, for example, in the standard corpus of linear array was considered a possible, an entity, a sign within the fraction systems of linear array. As Barbara showed, all of its attestations in the late Minoan period are doubtful, and perhaps the only one that seems possible is this one here from tablet Zachros 11, where supposedly we have L, L2, but it is very strange because we find the two shapes, the one that would supposedly be L and L2 merged together, fused together, and this is something we don't see with the rest of the fractions in the rest of the corpus. So it would be a sign with frequency 1, and it would be very strange. So we wanted to address this problem and feel safe about excluding it from our system and our approach. So we turned our attention to that principle laid down by Ben in 1950, that the higher a linear refraction, the more frequent it should be. And this principle it makes sense, it seems to make sense, but it was not clear why it should be so. So we tried to investigate what was the mathematical principle behind it. And we concluded that this was based on a certain correlation between the number of common divisors of a fraction sign and the frequency of that same fraction sign. This gets a bit technical, but let's try to exemplify it. So imagine you have a system of fractions that functions like linear array. So this means that if you have a special sign for a half and you have a special sign for 1/4, two signs for 1/4, that is 2/4, will equal a half. So you can replace those by the sign for a half. And this is what we see, except for those possible exceptions in the middle Minoan II period, you don't see EE. You don't see 1/4, 1/4. It gets replaced by J. So this replacement rule means that even if in your economy, you are not operating with half as a measure of something very often, you will still need to use the sign for a half very often because of this principle. Because anytime you need to write a half plus something, you will potentially write it with J plus one or more signs. So as an example, if you have 1/4, 1/4, and 1/4, 3/4, you do what we have seen before. You replace 2/4 with J, and then you had only one E, and you get JE. If you think of this in terms of a system, what this means is that the smaller the denominator of a fraction, the more frequent its sign will be. And the higher the denominator of a fraction, the less frequent a sign will be. And even with only the three starting values we have from the investigations of Bennett and Pope, we already see that work. That J is the most frequent fraction, both by itself and in combination. The second most frequent is E, and this squares well with the values they have. So let's think of a fictitious system where you have J for a half, E for 1/4, and F for 1/8, as we do have, and then signs, which we don't know which signs those would be yet. Then we have signs for 1/3, 1/5, 1/6, 1/10, and 1/20. In this system, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 signs will have common divisors in common with J. So J has 5 common divisors, and E will have 1, 2, 3 signs with common divisors. So again, J has more common divisors than E, and J appears as more frequent than E. This doesn't need to be an absolute rule, but there should definitely, if this principle is to work, there should definitely be a certain rank correlation in terms of how many common divisors a sign will have and how frequent it will be. And then we see why this implies that L is not really a sign and less so a sign that operates with the L series. Because within the L series, according to our constraints, the higher value the sign has, the more frequent it is, with L2 having 26 attestations. And if L were really a sign and higher than L2, as we would observe in the Zachros tablet, then we would expect it to be at least as frequent, if not more frequent, than L2.